All right, tonight on America First, we are 114 days into the Biden administration, and we have a major conflict in the Middle East, a crisis at the border, rising unemployment somehow, inflation, even gas lines, although not for much longer, we expect and we hope. Today, the president was asked if ransom was paid to the hackers of the Colonial pipeline. Here was his response.
Mr. President, would you take one more on the ransom? Were you briefed on the fact that the company did pay the ransom?
I have no comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a reason there's no comment on that. The president with no comment. For more on that, let's bring in our panel, RNC National Spokesperson, Director of Black Media Affairs, Dennard, and Air Force veteran and Florida congressional candidate, Paulina Luna. Guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
So, Paulina, I want to start with you. It's been reported that this company, Colonial, paid $5 million to these hackers, which, of course, is a terrible, terrible precedent to set and will just inspire more of this, won't it?
Absolutely. I think that it's probably a huge mistake for them to do that. Not to mention, in my opinion, if you have someone that's attacking our basic infrastructure, our gasoline lines, and really impacting the American people, I would say that that's an act of terrorism. And I thought that America did not negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. And you wonder, should the White House have maybe stepped in a little bit firmer with these guys and said, the funny thing about it is they paid the $5 million, and evidently what they got in return didn't even help them get back online. They still had to get online of their own devices, which just means they threw away $5 million, and we were also inspiring more people to do this kind of nonsense. Paris, I want to go to you, and I want to talk about gas prices going up even before this happened, and consumer prices in general, the threat of rapid inflation. Many Americans seeing this as kind of a flashback to what we saw in the late 1970s under Jimmy Carter. How bad do you see all this?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. What we see is failed leadership under Jimmy Carter, and what we see is failed leadership under Joe Biden. These are two individuals who have no concept on how to lead the American people, how to inspire confidence in the American people, and how to do the things that we need to do to make sure that American families, American workers are taken care of. When you look at the rising inflation, when you look at that, plus when you look at the cost of gasoline and this gasoline crisis that we were just in, it's a whole host of crises that are impacting everyday Americans. And that's the sad thing about this, is that Joe Biden and his administration fail to understand that their policies are not helping, but their policies are hurting. And when you have a failure of leadership, you have a crisis of leadership, you have no leadership coming from the White House, no leadership coming from the Democrats in Congress, and the people who suffer the most are the American people.
Well said. Paulina, in a recent statement, Trump said if there were long and horrible gas lines like this under himself, President Trump, the fake news would make it a national outrage. The media, in a lot of different ways, very much protects this current president of the United States, gives him a lot of slack, makes his job a lot easier. You agree?
100%. There's no question in my mind that if this was happening under President Trump, you would probably see people rioting in the streets, of course, being organized by some of those left-wing organizations that we all know have been causing havoc over the last couple of years. But I can tell you that especially moving forward into 2022, they are only going to continue to try to hide these facts from the American people. And so what I'm saying is that if you're tired of these gas lines, if you're tired of the inflation, what's happening overseas with Israel and Hamas, then you really need to get actively involved. And I think that it really comes down to taking back the House. And that's exactly why we launched our campaign to run for Florida's 13th congressional district.
Yeah, I want to, and let's stick with you just for 1 second since you brought it up. You're running, I know, fighting big tech is going to be a lot of what you're going after here. You're suing the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, as a matter of fact. Tell us what that's about.
So basically what I realized in my congressional run in 2020 was that Twitter and big tech as a whole, whether it was Google, Facebook, Instagram, but specifically with Twitter, they were putting their thumbs on the scale in regards to who had a voice. Specifically with me, they were shadow banning, censoring, and elevating the platform of my Democrat opponent. They still are, and they were doing it nationally. And so the FEC should hold Twitter accountable. And frankly, our lawsuit is in regards to Twitter being a corporation making an illegal in-kind contribution, which is not allowed. And I look forward very much so to seeing Jack Dorsey in court.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Interesting. And you're running for Congress as well. All right. Yeah. Perfect. Paris, we're going to talk about Israel here for just a second. You've had Hamas, which is a terror group. which is funded by Iran, firing more rockets into Israel. At least 7 Israelis have been killed since Tuesday. To be fair, a number of Palestinians have been killed as well there on the Gaza Strip. Some House Democrats, though, took to the floor today to actually defend Israel.
In case there is any confusion, Hamas is a terrorist organization designated by the United States, dedicated to the destruction of Israel, and which Congress has and must condemn for killing innocent civilians and using women and children as human shields. No one here should make excuses for a terrorist organization.
So that is very interesting to me, to see a Democrat have to say it and say it that way. And I think it's because there's been such a hesitancy among a lot of people at the White House to fight back against some of the words that have been used about this by some members of the squad and some of these far leftists who actually seem to defend Hamas, a terror organization, and think that Israel is at fault in this situation. What's your reaction to all that?
My reaction is that it's a shame that we are in 2021 and having the issue of whether or not to support one of our strongest and most important allies, Israel, if supporting them has become a partisan issue. Let's be clear. It should not be a Democrat or Republican issue on whether or not we should be supporting Israel. We, as the United States of America, should support Israel and their right to protect themselves from the terrorist organization known as Hamas. Yeah. And any Democrat that is in Congress or in leadership that does not stand up for Israel is wrong. And every Democrat in leadership, Speaker Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris should all stand unified with the Republican Party in support of Israel and denounce any Democrat that is not in support of Israel, because it's wrong and in many ways it's anti-Semitic, and we've got to make a stand for it and be very unequivocal in our support for our ally.
Yeah, I mean, when you break the situation down, both sides, there's a lot of tension. They do things to each other, but to be fair, when the rockets start going, that always starts from the Gaza Strip, and it's always responded to by Israel. And that's just the way it goes down, and that's a harsh truth a lot of people don't want to hear, but that is the way it is. Paris Dennard, Paulina Luna, guys, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks.